if not, we'll just have a nice little discussion before us.
All right, you're live.
Thank you, sir. Few the proud. I think. What do you think? The cold.
I heard that this stuff is called grapple.
Grapple?
Grapple. It's when the rain comes down. It's like a snowy hail. Because,
Yeah, it doesn't feel like. It doesn't look like
They
snow.
refer to it as like Dippin' Dots.
Yeah, it does look like. And on the on my windshield wipers, it looked like that. I can see them starting to pile up.
It goes either grapple or grapple. And grapple to me makes more sense because it's sort of like.
Yeah, it's not sleet.
Yeah.
I don't think.
But I heard that on the news this morning.
It's not hard like hail, but
Gravel. Yeah, it's like little hails, isn't it?
Yeah.
Baby hail.
Maybe
It's
Dippin'
springtime.
Dot hail. Dippin' Dot hail.
Well, we may gain a few others. I'm sure the cold has something to do with it, but I also, there's something interesting about the four of us here, because I do really genuinely believe we're at the whole point of Jesus' parable, and we often never get to it, because we're so fascinated by the first half of the story that we miss what I think is actually the primary reason. The reason why Jesus told this story is because of the second half with the older brother. That's what motivates the whole discussion. So we'll pray and we'll jump in and see where we land. Gracious, loving, lavish, prodigal God, we give you thanks that your grace meets us wherever we are, when we are at our lowest and know ourselves to be at our lowest. Your grace meets us there. When we stand in self-righteousness, when we feel as though we are in the right and full of resentment, your grace meets us there as well. Lord, as we consider once again this great story that Jesus told, open our eyes to new insight, breathe freshly through our words one with another, and speak to us that we might find our way into the party. That when we hear the music playing and when we can smell the meal cooking, that we find our way home. Amen. Amen. So, I thought I'd start with a reading from the Gospel of Paul McCartney and John Lennon. Try to see it my way. Do I have to keep on talking till I can't go on? While you see it your way, you run the risk of knowing that our love may soon be gone. We can work it out. We can work it out. Think of what you're saying. You can get it wrong and still you think that it's all right. Think of what I'm saying. We can work it out and get it straight. Or say goodnight. We can work it out. We can work it out. Those are Paul's lyrics, and then John brings in his little bit more morbid existentialism. Life is very short, and there's no time for fussing and fighting, my friend. I've always thought that it's a crime, so I will ask you once again to try to see it my way. I've been all Beatles lately, and I wanted to play the song, of course, but we're on the interwebs, and we'll get in trouble if we play copyrighted music. But for my money, that is the best Beatles song of all time. I absolutely love it. We can work it out. Besides loving everything about the sound, I love the way that it changes time signatures, which I researched. That was actually, so the first half, the happy part that we all associate, that we can work it out, that's all McCartney. It sounds like McCartney because he tends to be the, as John said later on talking about the song, the like unabashedly optimistic one. And then Lennon brings in, is a little bit more existential. Hey man, life is short, and so we better make the most of our time because we're not going to be here forever. But then, in the genius that was the Beatles, George Harrison, having heard this interplay between these two parts of the song, says we should change time signatures when we get to Lennon's part. And so it goes from, I think, a 4/4. I know the Lennon's part is a 3/4, and so it almost sounds like a waltz as they're dancing. Fussing and fighting, my friend. And So this song, for me, besides being my favorite song, it's a bit of a life motto as well. That when we see across these divides, whatever they may be, we often find them in our families, right? That's probably the first place they show up, is when we look across at someone who we both love and want to at times wring their necks and can't see why they see things the way that they do. And so there's this, this faith that this song articulates, that if we just stay talking, if we just can manage to try to see it from another person's perspective, in time we can work it out. And of course, this parable is all about unreconciled family dynamics within this small family of a father and two sons. But of course, in the larger context, it's about Jesus and him eating with tax collectors and sinners, and then the Pharisees and religious leaders having a hard time with that. And I'll remind you, too, I'm preaching on this today, same passage. It's really important that whenever we look at Jesus in dialogue with the Pharisees, that we not think of his conflict as a Jewish versus a Christian perspective, because one, Jesus is Jewish, right? And as I said a few weeks ago, I believe Jesus was a Pharisee, or at minimum comes from the tradition of Pharisees. He is not aligned with the Sadducees. Sadducees are the ones who are in league with Rome. They're the ones who run the temple. They are the power brokers. And that is not Jesus' crew, right? He is from Nazareth. That is on the outside of the outskirts of Israel's power. And that's where the Pharisees flourish. See, Pharisees were actually like the priests of the people. And they were the ones out in the hinterlands running the synagogues, trying to hold this thing together, as opposed to those who are, living high on the hog in Jerusalem with Caiaphas and Annas and the other high priests. And so this is an argument that we see throughout the Gospels of Jesus and the Pharisees. And it's the reason why it gets so heated is because it's a family argument. Right? That the people that we have our deepest conflicts often are the people who are closest to us. And that's why Jesus can be so at times difficult or get hard on the Pharisees. It's because I believe he's looking at them going, of all people you should know better, right? We are so close and yet at times so far. And so it is not a Jewish versus a Christian thing. I do believe this what's expressed at the beginning of Luke 15, which is Jesus eating with tax collectors and the sinners, and again, tax collectors, this is more than someone whose morals disagree with our own, right? This is not merely a disagreement over how permissive or restrictive to be. To you, the tax collector, this is someone who's colluding with the enemy. It's a Jewish person who has sided with the Roman Empire to extract taxes that on their own, on their face, were considered unjust at rates that were hard to relate to for people who had little money to begin with, and then they would take their own on top of that. So these are profoundly morally compromised people. I've heard it often said, like, maybe for us we'd say it's as though he's eating with arms dealers. Whoa. Okay. But then there's this word sinners, too. And sinners, of course, can mean any number of things, but scholars often think it probably does have something to do with sexual sin. That's usually how that is. So people who are considered morally tainted or compromised because of some form of sexual deviation. And so this is the crowd that Jesus is hanging out with, and the Pharisees don't understand why. And then he tells these three stories. And of course, we won't go over all of it again, but we remember back a few weeks ago, first story, 100 sheep, one is lost. 1% of the 100, and the shepherd searches for the one lost sheep, finds it, puts it on his shoulders, brings it home, and throws a party, invites all of his friends. Second parable, a woman who has 10 coins. One of them is lost, and so now we're at 10% of the total is lost. The woman searches and she sweeps her home, and she finds this coin, and she throws a party and invites all of her friends. At the end of both of those first two parables, Jesus says, he gives a little summary statement, by the way, if you want. This isn't the 15 minutes, you want that written down. And he gives a little summary statement, right, which is, I tell you the truth, in heaven there's more rejoicing over one sinner who repents than over 99 who don't need to, right? And it's a little strange story, too, because Luke says it's all about repentance and forgiveness, but sheep don't really repent, right? Coins don't really repent. And I think there's even a question of, in the third story, does the younger son really repent, at least in the way that we think? Or is he just looking for another meal? And he's starving to death, remembers that his father's workers have 3 square meals a day, and decides to go home. Is this true repentance, or is he just looking to not starve to death? And we don't know, and Jesus leaves us to fill in those blanks. So then this is our notes from a couple weeks ago. Then we're on to our third story. The climax of everything Jesus has been talking about, and he tells about a certain man who had 2 sons. And one of them goes to his father and says, "Give me the share of the inheritance now." Now, I've done more studies since we started this class even a couple weeks ago and read commentaries I've never read before. There are some who really disagree with some of what I taught. That, like, the idea that a son would do this is somehow deeply insulting. There are some who say that's not really right. There perhaps is some precedent for this not being as offensive, or at least not meaning, "I wish that you were dead to me," right? Which is how I posed it to you a few weeks ago. And who knows, right? Scholars don't know, nobody knows. But I want to at least bring it up to you when I learn something new. I want to share. You can always keep turning the jewel, right, and see a different facet of this truth through the jewel that is Jesus' storytelling. But one child is lost, the younger son, asks for his inheritance, goes to Vegas, spends all the money, and then runs out of money, and there is a famine in the land, decides to go home. And this is, of course, where most of our art over the years is focused on, right? Is this extraordinary encounter of the younger son going back home, and the embrace, right? The father running to his son, which, here's one, well, I still tend to think that it's hard for me to imagine in our time now, or 2,000 years ago, that asking for your inheritance before your loved one dies is unoffensive. I have a hard time. I read the argument for it. I respect the scholar deeply who makes the argument. I think it's still, just if it happened to you, if you were the one to ask for it, at minimum, it's audacious, yes? And so audacious, if not outright offensive, and the fact the Father grants it is strange and inexplicable. But one thing that I agree with the same scholar who was questioning my read of it is that the idea that a father would run is somehow out of bounds is questionable. And then she pointed out all of these verses, both in the Old Testament and New Testament, that refer to people running, and it's not considered a shameful thing. So perhaps some of the scholars I've read have overshot the humiliation by which the father expresses. Whatever is humiliating or not, nonetheless, it's emotionally powerful, right? It is, whether or not he's humiliating himself by running down the street to find his son, it is still an extraordinarily powerful encounter. And I told you about this scholar, this is Charlie Mccartney. I think it's a 7-foot bronze statue that I one day hope to see in person. But that's where we left the story. And then, of course, there's this whole second half of the story. This is Rembrandt's rendition, very famous one. I believe it's in St. Petersburg. And lots of really great writing has been done on this. We have the father embracing his son. I don't see it as much, but oftentimes art historians and observers point out how one hand is really, this hand appears to be really strong and perhaps almost representing masculinity, and then the other hand is smaller and softer and perhaps represents a father who knows both strength and tenderness. And then you have the younger son bowing at his father's feet. And here, right here, is our elder brother. Here's Rembrandt himself watching, which he's wont to do. And I think this is thought to be the mother, perhaps in the background, of which Jesus never says a word, as left to our imagination. What do you notice about the older brother just in Rembrandt's rendition? He's huge, he is, yeah. What else? He's big, he's tall. Can't really see it? I'm gonna try to see if I can. I probably can't.
No, it's the podium itself.
Oh! Let me move my
The brother's the one on the far side?
About that.
On the right.
Is that up?
Oh, he's watching from
That's
afar.
perfect.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, this is the brother here, and he's watching from,
Afar, I mean
Yeah.
separated.
there's a distance, yeah.
His look doesn't look happy. It's hard from this distance to see if it's condescending or angry, but he's like,
What else about the positioning of the older brother might indicate condescension?
he's above and looking.
He's
down.
literally looking down, isn't he? On both, here's his eyes, here's his brother's eyes, and he's looking down even on his father as well, who's stooping.
He's also restrained.
Yes, yes, holding back with his hands, right? Restrained. I often, when I talk with either with children or especially elderly folks when they are either wheelchair bound or sitting down, I regularly try to, when I'm talking with them, get down to be on the same level is very, very powerful when we're trying to communicate with another person. And of course, here we have the exact opposite. So we remember that Jesus' story is directed to two groups of people. One, of course, is the very religious who are upset about what he's doing, and the other are those with whom he's eating. And this is kind of from that Tim Keller book. He talks about how there's two ways of being lost. The first way is the way that we know of, right? The profligate living, the running to Vegas, sinning in the way that normally translates for, oh yeah, that's what moral sin is. It's when we go out and break the rules and live a wild life. But the other way of being lost is to try to keep all of the rules and think that that's what makes you right in God's sight. Much more subtle, right? And harder to identify. And yet religious people of all faiths are often known for one of these ways of being and less of the other. And so here we are at the end of the parable, and we finally get to the elder son. Let's, if you don't have it, you can grab it. But let's notice a couple things about the older son comes in on the back half of our paper. And I'll read it to you. If you want to pick up one, you're welcome to. Now his older son was in the field. Coming in from the field, he approached the house and heard music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what was going on. The servant replied, "Your brother has arrived, and your father has slaughtered the fatted calf, because he received his son back safe and sound." Then the older son was furious and didn't want to enter in, but his father came out and begged him. He answered his father, "Look, I've served you all these years and I've never disobeyed your instruction. Yet you've never given me so much as a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when the son of yours returned after gobbling up your estate on prostitutes, you slaughtered the fatted calf for him." Then his father said, "Son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found." What stands out to you about this ending? And there's no other, the next verse, the story moves on. There is no, and the Pharisees responded this way, it just moves on. There's kind of a cliffhanger ending here to this story. But what do you notice? What sticks out to you this time around about Jesus' conclusion to this great story?
The part that I got stuck on was his father came out and begged him.
Yeah.
He's lowering himself to this son who feels dismissed.
He comes out to his son. How does that parallel what he's already done in the first half of the story?
He ran to remember something.
So now we have a father who actually goes out to both sons, right? Regardless of whether or not the running is an act of humiliation or not, it is still an act of moving towards, right? It is a movement towards this lost son who's now been found. And here again, we have the father moving towards.
Well, it seems like the older son is jealous, and that's the father
trying to lift him out of it, trying to, you know, help him
Yeah.
like he did in Smith.
Yeah, and do you think, does the older son have a point?
I think he does. I don't know if it's all, I'm sure, yes, there's jealousy in there, but I think he has a good reason to be angry, and he has a good reason to make his father justify why.
Why do this? Because it is reckless, yes. We noted that when the father gives the son the ring, like that, it's probably an equivalent of like, okay, here's the family credit card. Here's the books to the family estate. Once again, the ring is what you do to seal, the signet ring you use to seal deals. It's a symbol of the power of the family placed right back upon him. Wouldn't a responsible parent say, we're so glad that you're back, and go get fed and cleaned up, and we will have a party, and we'll talk about restoring you in time when you prove yourself faithful. That's not what happens, right? It's just the whole thing right off the bat. Here's the keys to the Ferrari. Enjoy. There's a recklessness, right? It seems.
When I read this passage, and I think this is what Mark Twain wrote a compendium called Letters from the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like why he left Christianity because his family died, and like it didn't make sense to him anymore. But there's this one where the angels are doing accounting letters to heaven. Some industrialist, says a prayer and donates some money. And all the angels rejoice, and all the poor people who have been good Christians and done everything right, it's like, oh yeah, they did this. But hey, this robber baron said a prayer, yay, let's throw a party. And to me, it's sort of like this guy's been doing everything right, being taken for granted. And the younger son, the family who spent it all on hookers and who knows what, is celebrated simply for coming back and saying he's sorry.
Yeah.
It's hard.
And it's questionable whether or not he is sorry. We can at least ask that question.
Sure. It's hard. I think there is an archetype of people who follow the rules and find it very hard not to be resentful when those who don't follow the rules are, easily forgiven.
Yes.
Or even rewarded.
Or not only forgiven, but rewarded. It's both, right? Yeah. It's not, that's what is so offensive, I think intentionally offensive about this story, is it's not merely that your deficit of your, balance, which had been whatever, thousands and thousands in the negative, it's not merely brought back to zero, which would be forgiveness. It's actually, and now we're depositing $100,000 in your account, you're being rewarded. And let's think too, back to this part of what we did a couple weeks ago. And again, not every scholar agrees with the way that I framed this. Some think that when the father divides the estate between the two sons, that's a 50-50 split. I tend to think that out of the Old Testament world, the older son still would have 2 parts of the 3 parts of the estate. So it doesn't really matter whether it's, he has a right to be angry, actually he's even, you'd have an even more right to be angry if it was 50-50. But now this is gone, right? Here's the part the younger son took with him. It's gone, it's spent, it's not recoverable anymore. So what remains now are the 2/3. And if this younger son is going to be restored to, absolute sonship, that means this 2/3 will one day be divided again. Right? Here's going to be the younger sons. Here's going to be the older sons. Tell me about it. Yes.
The father said to his son, "You are always with me, and everything I have is yours."
Yeah.
So, to me, that means the older son can come back home and do the work and be there,
Yep.
but he's not getting any more. It's the way I interpret it.
Mm-hmm. Help me. I'm not sure I'm following your thought there. So
She's saying that the younger son would not get any more.
You just kept at the house, you wouldn't actually
Got
get more inheritance.
He's just there. He's welcome home, but
Yeah.
not getting any more.
Just hanging out.
yeah, that could be. I can see that. I can see that.
What comes to mind is that other parable of the workers who come in at different times of the day.
Yes.
Ones who come in at the end get paid the same as the people who started at the beginning. So
Yes.
it's not fair.
There is a way that Jesus is trying to crack open our hearts to provoke us, to bring out, as I said, like bringing out the poison, bringing out the worst parts of ourselves that we hide behind really good moral living, right? We hide what appears to be good intentions behind, our moral choices. And I've worked very hard, and look at all the things that I've done right. And there are ways that sometimes behind those good actions can lie a resentment that is toxic, that is self-righteous, that people run away from religion to get away from that kind of behavior, in order that we might come to relish in the glorious unfairness that is the kingdom of God. Right? So that parable is a great one. Everybody gets paid the same by the end, whether you worked the whole day or worked the last 10 minutes. You go, that's not fair. And Jesus goes, and that's the point. What do you say?
This story very much reminds me of like a clickbait story right now. You know, like the way things are written online, it just even the title, to get you to click on it.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much outrage in this story.
Yes.
It feels very much like a modern.
Yeah. I do think he's trying to provoke, and there's, not going to be too shocking that the people he's telling the story to will be at least part of, not solely, especially when we say Pharisees. Pharisees really didn't put Jesus to death. Some of the Gospels talk about how they tried to facilitate, but in the end, who has the power? It's not the Pharisees. It's going to be the Sadducees in collusion with the Roman Empire. So they help facilitate that, but they are not going to be the ones who ultimately make the decision. But nonetheless, he is alienating himself from the very people that I think he considers himself to be a part of.
I think it's also interesting what money, we'll call money, does to people.
Yes, talk about that, Jared. Thank you. What does money do to people?
In other words, if you take the money out of the picture, or the inheritance, or whatever you call it, is the brother excited then to see his brother? Because he probably loves his brother because he's his brother.
Yeah.
I guess, I don't know, it just does weird things to people.
It does, and you see
It
that.
creates challenges that weren't there before. Put it that way.
And you see that around the states. I mean, you see it all over the place, but certainly around the states. Heroin,
And someone dies.
someone dies, and who's going to get this portion, and who's going to get that, and what's fair, and what's
And all of a
not.
sudden, people that weren't ugly to each other become very ugly to each
Yeah.
other.
Yeah, that's right.
It's all, the money means something more though, because it's like the money and the stuff, it's not only, it's access to resources, but also your status in the family and the community.
Yes,
And there's a lot wrapped up in that inheritance. And
there is. There is.
I also hear a lack of appreciation in this. You didn't give me a coat, so I could have a party.
Yeah.
That
Oh,
was
he feels profoundly overlooked and unappreciated.
right.
Which I think everybody can relate to. Right? All of us have relationships in our life, have periods in our life where we have felt, and maybe right in this moment feel profoundly overlooked and unappreciated. And that hurts. And it usually provokes in most of us anger, right? This is not fair.
This story, as I said a couple weeks ago, was presented to me as a child much differently than this, which I'm loving this, but it was from the perspective of it's all a gift. So you shouldn't even be arguing about it in the first place. Whether you get 2/3, 1/3, whether you get 2 pieces of candy, this one gets one piece of candy. You got a piece of candy, and that was a gift to you. It was all about mercy. I mean, you don't have no reason to expect that.
Yeah.
It wasn't something. It's like when someone comes to your house and gives you something that it's not your birthday, it's not Christmas, or there's no expectation. You can't argue then that your brother got more than you, and because you weren't expecting to get anything in the first place.
Yeah.
Or you shouldn't have been expecting to get anything in the first place.
Yeah, and if you are expecting, doesn't that, to at least some degree, call into question whether or not you were doing the right thing for the right reasons?
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you just staying behind because you think you're going to get it all?
Uh-huh.
Or,
Yeah, I was with someone very recently, this will show up in my sermon today, so you could hear it twice, that cared for their parent the last couple of years of their life. And this is a person who had siblings, and so I had no idea the details of this person's estate, but there was an estate. And having cared for his sick parent the last several years of his life, his parents gave him the house. You're getting the house. And I didn't ask, well, what about your sibling? But you're getting the house. And what I loved about the story is that this child then recounted to me that saying to his father, I don't want the house, I just want you. Maybe that's the way it's, when family is working rightly, I think that's how it's supposed to be, right? That we value the relationship more than the possession.
I guess that was the point I was trying to make.
Yeah.
Not well as well articulated.
No, I think you made it beautifully, Jared. I do think that it's a great question. If there was no money at stake here, how would this change things? Or no status, right, in the kingdom. If we take status and money out of it,
Or you just happen to see that person.
yeah. And maybe not. Maybe he didn't like him anyway.
Yeah, maybe. Like Joe.
I want to point out one other thing here. Notice a couple things. Notice verse 29. He answered his father, look. And when you look up the Greek, that is how this comes. There's no father. Look. There is an immediacy and an anger that just comes right off the page, and that goes back to the source. Such seething anger on his lips. Look, I've served you all these years. I've never disobeyed your instruction, yet you've never given me so much as a young goat, so I could celebrate with my friends. But what do you notice about this next sentence? But when this son of yours returned, you slaughtered the fatted calf.
Were there multiple wives?
Ooh.
So it was like, not a brother, necessarily half brother.
There's a lot of really cool scholarship, and we didn't get into this at all, but it's really, really cool how would a first century Jewish audience hear a story that began a man and two sons? When we go all the way back and go, okay, well, there once was a man named Adam who had two sons. One was named Cain, the other was named Abel. They had a hard time getting along. Then you have Abraham who has two sons. One's named Isaac, the other's named Ishmael. Then you have Isaac who has Jacob and Esau. It just keeps on going down the line. The story of two sons and the younger one supplanting the older one is a pattern that shows up over and over and over again in the Bible. And oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes in the stories, there are different mothers involved too. And so the rivalry between the sons can also go back to parentage itself.
Was marrying more than one wife accepted or common by that time, or had it become? Because I know in the early times,
Yeah,
you could do it, but didn't there come a point even in the Old Testament era when
it's a good
that was
question.
no longer allowed?
I genuinely don't know. I don't know that it was ever prohibited, but my sense is that by the time the New Testament rolls around, something resembling monogamy becomes more realistic, and we see that if nothing else in one of the pastoral epistles when Paul talks about an elder, make sure that it's a husband and wife. So there seems to be a prohibition on polygamy if you want to be in spiritual leadership in the New Testament church. So there is a movement. How that happened, I'm actually not. But it's very, very interesting, right? This son of yours. He doesn't say what? This
Brother of mine.
brother of mine. There's a distancing, right? And we saw that in the Rembrandt. This is a contemporary artist, or young artist named James E.Q. You've got the father and the son, and you've got the older brother. But there's a distance between them. In the middle is this calf, right?
It's not just a distance, it's shifting blame,
Yes.
or it's placing additional blame. I mean, he and I joke, when the kids did something they should do. I'm like, oh, look at your kid, like, God did.
Mhm.
I do that with the dog.
He's your son.
But it's kind of insinuating that this child is following the footsteps of the dad, or the dad is somehow to blame for what the kid did.
Right.
What we do in jest, but it is purposeful in
Yeah.
the sense of the joke. But here, obviously, it's not.
And we do it as a joke, we do it as a not joke,
Yeah.
we do it in our family life, we do it in our public life. Right? This, you're not a, you're not a real, I don't even know how those people, they're not even real Americans, are they?
Yeah.
How can anybody be a true American and think that way? There's a distancing, right? We don't see the other side, whatever the other side is. It's difficult to see them as our siblings, right? It feels as though they are from another planet, from another parent. And yet here we are, living in the same country, the same community, the same church. And Jesus is seemingly trying to get these two brothers to be connected once again. So the brother uses the distancing language. What about the father? Verse 32.
Grateful to have the son back.
He refers to him as this brother of yours.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is.
See?
Wow.
So it really, really important, right? The older son is distancing himself from his brother, this son of yours, and the father says, oh no, this brother of yours. It's reconnecting. Try to see it my way. We can work it out. We can work it out. Life is very short and there's no time, so we've got to celebrate, right? Fatted calf's a big deal. Comes up a couple times here. Fatted calf is, celebration of the year, party of the year, party of a lifetime. It's a big feast. And the older brother picks up on that. He says, you didn't give me a young goat. It's not fair. And the father says, yeah, but we have to celebrate. He was dead, and now he's alive again. I've already gone over some of these. We notice the older brother has stayed out. He's not joining the party. He's outside, and the father comes to him. Parable ends, and we never know, does the older brother join the party or not, which is the whole point. Is he welcome to join the party? Of course he is. Right? By the father says, but we don't know if he will or not, which is meant to be our invitation to ask, so where do you want to join it or not? Do you want to stay in your sin accounting? Do you want to keep all the books, nice and balanced? All the sin balance sheets? Is that what you want to do? Because if you're going to do that, there's no room for that at the party, right? At the party, we're not worried about the sin accounting books. At the party, we're just celebrating together. So the older brother stays out. This is one really interesting take. This is from the Tim Keller book. He talks about the two ways of being lost. He describes them as self-discovery versus moral conformity. That the younger son is kind of represents self-discovery. I'm going to go do it my way. I'm going to try to live life on my terms and find meaning, not in how my father told me how to do it, but in my own way. And then the older son represents moral conformity. And this book, Keller's book, was written, 10 years ago now, maybe longer. And he's writing to he's a PCA pastor, so primarily more conservative Presbyterian audience. And so he likes to equate this way more with the left, and this way more with the right. A left that says, I'm going to discover who I am on my own, right? I'm going to go discover my way. And that son doesn't end up doing all that well, does he? Right? He comes to the end of that and then is welcomed home. And then the other way of trying to be good is through moral conformity. And of course, Keller says, but in the end, the point of Jesus' parable is that both ways are lost. If we don't look to the grace of God to save us, as opposed to our own self-discovery or our desire to follow our rules, we remain equally lost, which I think might be a helpful thing for us to consider in our divided times as well. This thing that the Father says to me, this to me is the whole point of the parable. Remembering that Jesus, wait. Big thing we missed. You have to do this. And we've only got 3 minutes, we can do it. We remember back, there's a search. We remember back, there's a search. And then we notice in this one, there's no real search, right? The father waits, but doesn't go searching. So put yourself back into what you imagine about this story in the first century. The father's clearly a wealthy landowner, just is. In the context of what we know in the story, who should have done the searching?
The mother and the brother.
Or just the brother.
I
The
think it's-
father gave him the money to go and do what he wanted to do.
Yeah. True. So there is this freedom that's given, there's no doubt. Just as the freedom at the end of the parable is, you're going to come in or not. I am very provoked, and this is all from Tim Keller and his professor at Mccartney. I find it very provocative that is Jesus telling a story where he is holding up a mirror to the Pharisees and the religious leaders and saying, you look like the older brother. And what I'm doing is what you should be doing, which is going out and searching for what's lost. That the older brother should have been the one to go searching.
If he truly wanted it, he should have got it.
Yeah. That's what a good older brother would do, if not for the love of your brother, at least for the love of your father. Even if you hated him. If you love your father and you know that your father's heartbroken, why would you not go search for this younger brother? It's an argument from silence. I find it very provocative. So what Keller does in his book is he says that Jesus is the older brother. He is our true older brother, the one that in fact did leave his father's house to come and bring all of us lost children back to the father's house. The lack of the search certainly sticks out. It means something. What it means, I don't know. This is Keller's idea, that the lack of the search is meant to go, older brother should have come and didn't. And Jesus saying, and look what I'm doing. This is exactly what I'm doing by eating with tax collectors and with the sinners. I'm being the older brother that you refuse to be. Lastly, verse 31. If any of you have ever struggled with resentment, for any reason whatsoever, I believe that all of us do. I believe that the spirit of the younger son dwells in every one of us. I believe the spirit of the older son dwells in every one of us. There's a side of us that, if we're really honest, we have had moral lows in one form or another. Maybe I bottomed out the way that, the younger son does, but if we look close enough in our story, we have received grace that we don't deserve. And it has welcomed us home. There's a spirit of that younger son that dwells inside of us. And there's a spirit of the older son that dwells inside of us too, which is resentful that you didn't do it fairly. So here's the father's response to the resentful son. Son, the word is actually child, it's technical. Child, you are always with me. Everything I have is yours. When we struggle with resentment, I have resentment problems in my life. I do. I've been the one, the way, I can so hear in the look, old man. I've probably said those exact words to my old man, telling him what I felt he needed to know about all the things that he was doing wrong. I've said it to my bosses in the past. I've said it to my parents. I've said it to any number of people who I felt needed to hear the truth from me. And this is the response to all of us deeply resentful, rule-following, self-righteous people. You're always with me. Everything I have is yours. There's nothing that the older that the father gives to the younger son that doesn't belong already to the older brother. The fatted calf is his fatted calf. The goat is his goat. The brother is his brother, whether he recognizes it or not. Because, Carol, as you said, it's all grace. In the end, it's all grace. Each day that we're given is a gift, and none of them are guaranteed. So we can look at a person's life that is shorter than we think that it should be and go, that's not fair. And maybe it isn't. And we can look at people who made all kinds of bad decisions and got to live a very long life and go, that's not fair. Perhaps it isn't. The invitation that Jesus is making to the Pharisees, to the religious people, to Christians on all sides of the spectrum, from moral conformity to self-discovery, is to recognize our whole life as a gift of grace. And if we're able to do that, then suddenly that which we think separates us from others just begins to dissolve, right? Begins to dissolve. Doesn't mean that there aren't times in our life where we need to speak our truths. I don't think it's all bad that I've done that at times. I also think I've overdone it. And maybe, especially as I'm aging, it's time to let some of that self-righteous indignation go and start to see that each day is a gift, each relationship is a gift, even the problematic ones. They're all opportunities to love and to be loved. So may that verse be something that you meditate on and let it sit with you. God's always been with you. So all those times when you felt like, God, where were you when this happened? It's not fair that this happened. How can you let this happen to me? I was just a kid. All that stuff, that really vulnerable stuff. The invitation is, God's never not been with you. If we are waiting for the lifeguard God who, blows the whistle and stops the bad behavior, we're never going to, that's not the God of the Scriptures. The God of the Scriptures is not one who jumps in and stops every bad thing from happening. It's the exact opposite, right? The God of the Scriptures is the one who says, I'll go swim in the pool with you and suffer the abuse of the bully with you and get the chronic diagnosis with you. So the invitation is to see and trust that God's been with us every single time we've thought that we've been abandoned. We haven't. And each gift that we think has been withheld is not. Because in the end, it's all grace. Let's pray. Gracious God, we thank you for this powerful parable that has been working on our hearts for 2,000 years now. May it continue to work on us until we all make our way into the party where we can celebrate together as siblings. Amen. Thank you all. This is fun.
Sorry for your loss, Joel.
Yeah, thanks. 20, I've known her 20 years. She was a simple woman in this way. Farmer. She was working on the farm still. She died on me right until 3 years ago. So really healthy life.
Those type of women are amazing. I know one similar that she's like out repaving the driveway and it's 92 and you're like, it's 85 degrees outside.
Yeah.
How do these people do it?
I'll be there tomorrow. Look forward to it.
Have a good one.
Thanks. All right, Mona, we ready?
So much hydration.
I am always hydrating. If you haven't noticed, I overdo it.
That's really good.
the money for the bell saw, I got off. You might